Okay, and I might just go ahead and get started. And I think people are still kind of trickling in, but we'll go ahead and begin. So I just want to welcome everyone. I'm Alitris Niels. I'm the Executive Director of Conservation Catalyst. And Conservation Colloquy, for those of you who are new to our program, it's a transdisciplinary platform for holistically unraveling global problems between wildlife and people. And Wildlife Wednesday is a free webinar that takes place the first Wednesday of every month. It's for professionals and students to come together, learn, and reconnect with each other on these important topics, and so that we can start breaking down barriers to conservation success. And so those of you that are new to us, you're in for a real treat because we always have an innovative presentation from an elite world expert like we have with us today. And then my favorite part is that we have these really lively discussions at the end that allow us to ask questions and bring in expertise from around the world. And so each month we highlight an interdisciplinary researcher who's working at the nexus of any type of problem or coexistence with wildlife. And our guest today is all of these things and more. So I had the pleasure of meeting Anna earlier this year. And I think there's certain people that come into your life and you just instantly know that you're kindred spirits. And we just had so much in common. I was so impressed by her expertise and just wealth of information. And so I knew that this was someone that I wanted to work with and collaborate with, hopefully for the rest of my career. And,
thank you very much.
And so Anna is just phenomenal, as you'll see. She is holds a PhD. She's not only a great communicator, but she's also an excellent writer in several languages. She's published books. She's proficient in publishing articles and blogs and disseminating conservation science across the breadth of people that need to have this information reach their ears. And so I'll let Anna tell a little bit more about herself. But if you could please just join me in welcoming Anna Sustersic and to Conservation Colloquy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alitris. It's a great pleasure to see you again. And hi to everybody. Nice to meet you all. And yes, I will briefly introduce myself and then I will jump into the topic of today. I hope to be not to be too long, and sorry for my English because on the evening particularly it go down. So I hope to be comprehensible at least. So my name is Anna Sustersic. My last name is impossible to pronounce for most of the people. And I'm speaking from Tanzania, Arusha in particular. Arusha is the place where I work and live most part of the year. The rest, I work in Italy. And before coming here in Tanzania, I was working in Italy in communication, but devoted in particular to conservation of nature and promoting the sense of protection of nature and human-wildlife coexistence interaction. And in particular, I worked with brown bears and wolves in the Alps. Coming in Tanzania, the landscape of human-wildlife conflict interaction better opens a lot, of course, for the number of species involved, but also for the magnitude of the issues. Here, I collaborate with PAMS Foundation. PAMS Foundation is an organization that works here in Tanzania in conservation from different, having activities, very different, a portfolio of very different activities, as for example, environmental education, of course, human-wildlife coexistence actions, anti-poaching, mitigation of illegal wildlife traffic, and so on. So it's a very complex model of organization working in conservation. So I started to work with PAMS Foundation, dealing with human-wildlife interaction in particular. And PAMS has a long story about involving communities in for solving problems of human-wildlife interaction. So I started to be very interested in the communication that has been used in promoting coexistence. So slowly I decided to setting up a project with PAMS Foundation, entirely dedicated to the communication that has been used in promoting acceptance in human-wildlife interaction in different parts of the world, in different geographic and social cultural contexts. So I started a project that calls Coexistence.life. The website has the same name, dedicated to understand how the communication can be used in a powerful, effective way in order to promote a good interaction between humans and wildlife. So, jumping in our today's topic. I will begin with a short story. Sorry. Okay. Last autumn, I arrived. I organized a huge trip around different parts of the world to understand how communication has been used in human-wildlife interaction, and to understand which kind of communication is more useful in different contexts. So, last autumn, I arrived in a remote part of Chinese Tibet, not far from the border with the real Tibet. Many pilgrims along the way. Sorry. Sorry, something went wrong. Okay. Many pilgrims along the way arriving in this remote place made their long journey of vows and prayers to Lhasa. My destination was a very small community of yak shepherds in the mountains, where I would stay for a while, hosted by a family of farmers. This destination was a part of this long journey in Asia, but not only, undertaken to get an idea, as I told you, of the state of human-wildlife coexistence in different geographical and cultural contexts, and in respect to different species, and to better understand the level of acceptance of the presence of animals as wolves, bears, snow leopards, tigers, elephants, and so on, and the reasons at the base of these differences. So I arrived there in the days of the first snowfalls, when the wolves start to move progressively closer to the villages at nightfall. Wolves, bears, and snow leopards populate those hills, and periodically, weekly, if not daily, they prey on the yaks. Now, in this region of the Tibet, the products of the yak farming are the main source of livelihood. Come on. Sorry, I don't know exactly what happens. Okay, sorry, you have the pictures again. A loss caused by a snow leopard or wolf attack can have a big impact on the annual economy of these households. So I was prepared to meet a community completely opposed to wildlife, probably scared and angry, with a lot of retaliation problems. But surprisingly, I found something completely different that surprised me deeply. There were no fears towards these animals, at least leopard and wolf. A little fear about bears. A level of predation and attacks, even on people, was not only tolerated, but mostly justified, and as a necessity of a species that has always cohabited with men on that territory, having full rights to be there. At the basis of this vision, which in other parts of the world probably we will call enlightened, there are some fundamental concepts on which the philosophy of that region is based, an ancient branch of Buddhism. The deeply felt dedication to alleviate the suffering of all living beings, the understanding that everything is devoid of self-nature, and the concept of interconnection and interdependence of all biotic and abiotic natural factors invade literally the daily life of these communities in a capillary way, shaping the life vision and being reflected in an important way on the level of acceptance of wildlife. A level of acceptance that in other regions of the world could be considered a great achievement. Of course, not all levels of society share this vision in the same way. The monks have a slightly different point of view from the breeders, the men from the women, and so on. But nevertheless, the main attitude and the main values and the perception of wildlife had a common basis among all the sections of the community. And to confirm this, I found the same attitude in the mountains of Nepal, where the same branch of Buddhism regulated the life of the mountain communities. In both situations, children grow up listening stories extracted from the life of the Buddha. Many of these have as protagonists the animals, also venomous snake, as in this case, or dangerous animals as crocodiles. They almost always play an important role in changing mind of people, transmitting to humans concept of respect and understanding of the other. There are a lot of these stories about interconnection between all organisms, about love for nature, stories where animals help people which at the end recognize their value, or stories that help to explain complex concepts such as compassion. These are the ideas that shape the childhood and the world view. The son of the shepherds that hosted me spent a lot of time explaining me the difficult concept as karma and compassion, and he was not even 16 years old. Not too bad, isn't it? Don't get me wrong, it seems I'm describing a perfect world. Absolutely not. Even in those regions, interaction with wildlife is not simple and present a lot of issues. But what is interesting is understanding that the strategy that make these good principles so pervasive in the society at all age stage. A strategy that, as well as of course the validity of the principles, could be imitated also in different parts of the world. For example, it's very interesting to observe how the great affinity of some of the Buddhist principles fits perfectly with the rules underlying ecology, which underpin the concept of relation. And these are reflected for example, in the philosophy of modern ecological movements born in completely different parts of the world, such, for example, the deep ecology movement. This is a demonstration that culture's fascination have important implications in designing effective communications in areas with different culture. And this means that cultural contamination can be a powerful tool to create messages and narratives about the coexistence. So I learned a lot during this trip that was, of course, here in Africa, in Asia, in different parts of Asia, in the US, where I met Dr. Nails, and also in Europe. But in this particular part, I learned a lot. This part gave me some important insight about communication. The idea of the word as a consequence of relationship between biotic and abiotic factor, if built from the first education, shape deeply the world of attitudes of the adults. The word of culture, whether religious or traditional, are a strong ally and not an enemy to fight. In other words, sometimes it's good to delegate the delivery of the message to the mouth of tradition. And you know, a lot in a lot of cases, biologists or researchers are not on the same page with this statement. The same message, if declined for different age groups or target audiences, create a redundancy that is a key element of successful communication. So ultimately, the perception of wildlife was shaped by a set of details coming out from the tradition, religion, education, social rules in a mixture that pervaded every corner of society. Through a combined strategy of communication, they managed to provoke deep changes in perception. So I asked to myself, how can we use communication to help human and wildlife to coexist? And how can we achieve a result similar to this in other parts of the world? Let's start from one fact, speaking about how can we use this powerful tool that is communication to change perception. It was April last year, and I was surfing the internet looking for something. You know, those times when you are bored and you jump from page to page, not looking for anything, but waiting for something to look for you. Well, one of these cases. I was almost asleep when something caught my attention, the cassowary, an animal whose existence I was almost unaware of. It's a bird, a big bird. Okay, the news on the newspaper was a cassowary bird attacked and killed its owner after he fell down on the way to feed him. Terrible. Okay, suddenly my attention was reactivated and I tried to dig a little deeper into these stories and the words opened up. Journals from all over the world reported this wild notice, this wild news. So now we do an experiment. Now I give you some headlines that come out in the newspapers from all over the world, and you try to understand how do you feel after reading. So a giant bird, living dinosaurs, horrible accident, murderous claws, and so on. Result, terrible. So I don't know how are you feeling, but the time is of course too short to understand it well, but two things probably are sure. You will never forget the face of a cassowary, and you will never look even at a turkey with the same eyes again. Why not? It's a matter of words, it's a matter of communication. So killing is not the same as slaughtering or murdering. A big bird is not the same as a giant bird. Eating and mauling do not have the same impact. This is the power of words, which, if they are well chosen, project us into a universe made of colors, sensations, and what is more important, emotions. Once created this universe of emotions and sensations around the cassowary, and once associated with it, it will be very difficult to destroy it or replace it. And this will be especially true if this is the first time you hear about the cassowary. Now, let's get closer to today's topic and try to do another experiment. So close your eyes and pay attention to the images and colors that come out in your mind when I say the following two words. So first one, conflict. Second one, coexistence. It is very likely that in the first case, you saw something similar to this, black background, war, scenario, and so on. In the second case, something more similar to this, clear color and images of peace. When we talk about conflict, our mind is immediately alerted. It's about fighting for life, either us or the enemy. It is a confrontation, and I don't know if I will come out the winner. The chemistry of our body change with a single word. Now, in this perspective, try to think about the consequences of perceptions saying human-wildlife conflict and or human-wildlife coexistence. Okay, we are in the world of communication, a sort of world of spells where words have the magic power of conveying messages, able to evoke sounds, colors, emotions, to design images, able to change the chemistry of our body, our mood or perception, our values, and even behavior. I'm simplifying a little bit, but maybe not too much. Communication is an incredibly powerful tool. As we have seen before, capable of taking us into landscapes that we may like very much, that can free us make us uncomfortable, or make us want to return. Can you imagine the magnitude of this? The different way in which we deliver a message, in which we design our communication, produces results that can be very different. Once, I don't remember where, I heard a funny little story speaking about the different results you can have with shaping in a different way your message, giving more or less care to the words you choose for delivering a message. So the story was about the Pope that was asking to Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel. So first case, the Pope said to Michelangelo, Michelangelo, paint the Sistine Chapel with images taken from the Holy Book. The result will be likely something like this, miserable and without any detail, something very poor. Second chance, Michelangelo, paint the Sistine Chapel inspired by episodes from the Holy Book that can be an example and inspiration for all our faithful. Okay, better. More details, more passion, more reality into the design. Okay, we are on the right way. Third chance. Michelangelo, your hand is the link with the maker. Make the Sistine Chapel become the song of God's immense glory. Transform it in a door to heaven to bring us closer to the maker, so that all our decisions can be made under his right and merciful gaze. Wow! And we have the Sistine Chapel. So this is just a joke to think about the consequences of the care you invest in shaping messages to obtain the best result possible. But how can we choose the right words to design the right message? How can we construct a real, powerful mental landscape? There are a lot of variables involved, of course, but just speaking about words, one rule is the association of two or more senses. This can often create a more impactful association in the brain and fix the concepts. So we have to generate a landscape in which we care about sounds, colors that words can evoke to make it more interesting for each sense. Now, just another joke. Words can evoke sounds, shapes, and colors. So now I will tell you two meaningless words and you have to associate them with a shape. So, first word is maluma and second word is taquete. Which shape associate with each of these two words? Probably most of you think that maluma sounds round and taquete sounds angular. And probably each of you have also associated a sensation to this word. And maybe some of you, but chromesthesia is pretty rare, also a color. So this is the power of the words, even meaningless. So why we communicate? We communicate to guide our public to that places we want they go. And if we are good communicators, they will go exactly there. More carefully, we will design our message or story, more detailed and real will become that mental place. More we will be able to expose our public to a real experience, to push him to make a sort of real journey from which, if the communication has been effective, he will come back changed, with a new information, with a new point of view, and maybe with some new significant doubt. Experience could have positive or negative effects, but the point is that we could have changed the way the public from that moment on will perceive similar information. If it will have other experiences of the same topic, its new position about it will be strengthened. In more technical terms, what is called elaboration likelihood model, used by many environmental communicators, works exactly like this, from getting the audience attention to facilitating their comprehension, elaboration, integration of new information with old, and finally, shifting attitudes, and ideally resulting in enduring behavior change. But how to shape a communication that facilitates comprehension, elaboration, and integration of new information? Uses different senses, as we have seen, is one way. And how, the second question is, how can communication contribute to shaping perception in the context of human-wildlife coexistence? As we saw at the beginning with our friend Kasuri, the press know perfectly the rules to use this power, to exploit an issue that has been well taken to divide the mass into useful groups of voting people. Human-wildlife interaction in itself is a great communicative challenge because it touches two extremely sensitive buttons, economy and personal safety. When we hear about interaction with wildlife, it's mainly related to some damage on human activities, as for example, crop losses, as in the case of elephants or livestock depredation. Or, on the other hand, the risk of aggression and fear. Both have to do with ancestral sensitives related to survival. These two very specific issues make it particularly difficult to address the topic. When we hear this kind of news, it is not easy to provide a response so impactful as the provocation has been, a response that managed to move as many emotions as the news SARS has done. But it's precisely this difficult that makes communication on this subject so fundamental, because both issues, economy and safety, need to be addressed, dissolved, and mitigated in order to promote the acceptance that underpins coexistence. So now, thinking about human-wildlife interaction, let's think which are the elements necessary to reduce economical losses and to tackling the problem of risk and fear. Speaking about economy, for sure, promoting the adoption of loss mitigation measures, promote change of behaviors, having the know-how and economic resources, of course, for the autonomous application of prevention measures, have a good access and good knowledge of support opportunities as insurances, incentives, compensation, or consolations. On the other hand, if we speak about risk and the consequent fear, we need knowledge of the biology and ethology of the animals concerned, knowledge of the behaviors to adopt if we met an animal, having the empathy with the species, understanding the ecological rule of other species, understanding the reality of necessary relationship that bind us, that link us to the rest of the organism, and having values that include the existence of other organisms. So communication plays a fundamental role in each of these points. A targeted and detailed strategy can be designed to produce experiences capable of changing level of knowledge or improve skills in each of these points. And what is important about this? A deeper knowledge has consequence on the quality of management of our own goods, the perception of our responsibility in taking care of them, and improve responsibility and the perception to be able to be in charge, give us the sensation to be in control of the situation. And this in turn help to improve self-confidence with consequences of diminishing fear and promoting acceptance. So triggering this chain of effects through communication is definitely not easy. We want concrete results. We want change very deeply rooted attitudes and playing with delicate topics. First, we need time, but also some communication ingredients are needed. And among them, grab attention, trigger emotion, and involve. All of you probably know what happens when you go walking in the city with a woman. At some point, you will turn around and she will no longer be at your side. You have lost her in front of a shop, completely enchanted by a particular dress. A specific color, a specific shape, a specific set of details makes that dress perfect for the self-image that that woman had built for herself for the coming autumn season. Wearing that dress, she will feel different, she will behave different. So the rule of communication is to become that dress, to have all the characteristics to make a woman, or more generally your public, stop on the street and eventually change behavior. For this, you need to know that woman very well. And in order to do this, you need to listen observer very carefully. And this is because why you need time. So tradition, culture, social needs, ranks, social dynamics, and expectations, the aesthetic taste, age, are all details of that dress. And sometimes, to really better understand them, we have to forget ourselves and jump into a world where values, priorities, and aesthetic tastes are very far from ours. Here you have some examples of campaigns developed in different parts of the world about conservation and conservation and human wildlife coexistence. You can understand the different level of aesthetic that they have and also the different messages. The first one is Wild Aid, developed by Wild Aid for China, speaking about the traffic of rhino for the rhino horns. A little bit disgusting. The second one is brilliant and has been developed by WWF, speaking about the disappearing of the sharks in the sea. If you cannot read, in the link part where the shark is written horrifying. In the other part, the empty part, is written more horrifying. Then we have fox hunt. Then we have Tanzanian advertisement for anti-poaching campaign. And this girl with violet hair is a very famous singer here in Tanzania. The next one is again something surprising about the traffic of horn of the rhino. Then we have something coming from Congo, and then something else very, very surprising. So surprise, create a link with the everyday life, move, disgust, always to grab attention and provoke an emotional reaction. Now, what about involve? This is a guy that I met when I went in India near the Ranthambore Reserve, and he is setting up a group of volunteers coming from a village of hunters and herders to do a program of citizen science, collecting signs of the presence of the tiger. Since they started this project, the people became so passionate, so involved in the tiger situation that they really changed their opinion and perception about this animal. Because of the knowledge, of course, because doing citizen science, you acquire a lot of new informations about the species. So just to give you another example, citizen science is becoming to be used also for human-wildlife interaction. But in any case, is really a powerful tool to involve people and to pass informations. Improving knowledge, one of the most important aim of citizen science is improving knowledge, contributing to scientific monitoring, as we said before, to be in control of the situation through the informations, acquiring technical digital knowledge, being part of a community, promoting active knowledge. New knowledge is not learned passively by reading or watching a video, but entering into a dialogue with other players. I don't know if all of you know iNaturalist tool is a powerful tool to promote citizen science. In 2014, I participated in the creation of a citizen science project for explorers of the life on the Alps. The idea was to connect people interested in fauna and flora of the Alps through iNaturalist. So people go and collect pictures of animals and plants and send them into the system where other experts from all around the world can validate or tell you the name of the species you photographed in environment. After 6 years of the project, it has got more than 800,000 observations, more than 16,000 species, more than 10,000 identifiers, and more than 30,000 observers. But what is more interesting is that it has created a mutual contribution to the knowledge and the new human relation. And this strengthens the concept and the knowledge. So doing it in an active way. Another way to involve people is using the cultural tools the specific culture offer to us. In Tanzania, for example, music accompanies all phases of life, and it is always present in the daily life. So music and songs are very powerful tools of conveying messages and making them pass and stabilize through the different layers of society. A couple of years ago, PAM's Foundation launched a project to spread out among the rural communities in southern Tanzania the idea of the need to adopt passive solutions to keep elephants away from crops, chili fences that are in the picture. Chili fences take the elephants are very irritated from the powder of dry chili, and they stay away from the fences, so without entering in contact with people. So it's a very smooth and passive tool to take elephants far from the crops. To do this, local artists were recruited to write the lyrics and the music for the song, which was broadcast on local radio. Radio is the most popular tool of communication in rural areas of Tanzania. So the project had a large success, and many used the song as a ringtone for the telephone, demonstrating how the message had penetrated daily life. And also a lot of farmers in the weeks after the launch of the song campaign asked PAM's help in constructing chili fences for their crops. These are only a couple of tricks to have in mind when we shape our communication. Produce redundancy through words that stimulate the different senses, the coordinate use of different communication tools, and well-targeted messages. The involvement of the community at all levels of the communication planning, making communication an active process. And don't try to force toward messages that we consider important in the form that makes sense for us, but let the culture and the tradition help us to find the right words and the right speaker to tell them. Fulfill these needs requires time and investment. We are mixing elements of psychology, culture, religion, social science, and generational dynamics. It is unthinkable to obtain significant results without investing time and resources. Results will be stronger if we plan redundancy of information. Certainly, this puts us in difficulty with donors who require us results in a short term, but given the importance that communication is acquiring in our world, this is a change of point of view that they too will necessarily have to make. I know you are excited about this last picture, but it's the only one that is not mine. So, recognizing the importance and the role of communication in promoting coexistence, PAM's Foundation launched in 2019 the project Coexistence.life, as I told you at the beginning. A project entirely dedicated to communication used in promoting human-wildlife coexistence. Understanding the critical elements of the success and failure of communication activities, collecting good examples of activities or media produced in different social contexts, and collecting data useful for people that work in communication, for human-wildlife conflict, of course. In simple words, Coexistence.life represents a point of reference to talk about how to use communication in the most efficient way in promoting human-wildlife coexistence. The project have three main pillars that support it. First, the sharing of experiences. Cultural contamination as a generator of communication materials, the second. To provide useful information to refine the quality and effectiveness of communication. I hope my network will be okay for a while, at least. Very often, projects dealing with coexistence do not have skilled people, skilled communication people in the team, or they need, or they don't have necessary economic resources for planning an effective communication. This produces failures or ineffectiveness in getting the goals of involvement, of change of perception or change of behavior. That is the last goal we are trying to achieve. So the idea is that the idea of Coexistence.life is that having a reference where to find useful material to build a good communication is fundamental, especially in cases where resources. The idea is that the system, by networking professionals in the sector of communication and in the sector of human-wildlife coexistence, can offer support to projects that want to develop a communication strategy but do not have the skills to do. The basic idea that sustain the projects is that we never start from a scratch. There is definitely someone who has experienced it before us and from whose mistakes and successes we can learn. So Coexistence.life is mainly a platform where you will find a communication library that is an archive of materials that have been developed to promote coexistence in different parts of the world, such as, for example, video, brochures, infographics, podcasts, and so on. So you just type the keywords as, for example, video, bear, Europe, and you have a list of video that has been produced for promoting coexistence with the bears. Then you have 4 different thematic blogs dedicated to coexistence. One that is specific for tips tips about technical tips about communication for coexistence. Another one is about news coming from the world of in the field of human-wildlife coexistence. Another one is stories from the field that can be used, for example, to develop educational activities or to put the topic in a classroom as a topic of discussion. And the last one is dedicated to articles that guests from other parts of the world write for coexistence. A section is dedicated to educational activities, but is work in progress. And another work in progress session is dedicated to the description of different techniques, mitigation techniques used in different parts of the world for different species. Another section is dedicated to data that are collected from the public. So you have an periodic online survey to collect data from the public that can provide useful material for communication. So all of you are invited to fulfill this online survey. And a section where various kinds of supports are offered to organizations that wish to promote their projects about human-wildlife interaction or structure a targeted communication. Also, the idea of our media library is to become a kind of sounding board for projects dealing with coexistence and become a further showcase for them. The aim is not only to help to make communication, but also to promote projects that are dedicated to coexistence. This is why anyone who has success stories or of communication or stories about communication success or failures, interesting stories from the field, peaks, materials, communication materials useful to understand better the coexistence they want to share is more than welcome, and we will be happy to promote it by designing a shared plan of communication, but also to offer our website and social media to promote it. to create new skills about communication for human-wildlife coexistence that will be the issue of the future, of the coming futures, speaking about in terms of conservation, because the relation, the relation between human activities and animals will be even more intense in the future. Specific training for this is important. So a workshop dedicated to how to communicate and promote coexistence with wildlife based on the skills and experience developed both by PAM's Foundation and Catalyst Conservation was scheduled for this winter, but unfortunately COVID emergency forced us to postpone it. So probably, luckily, next year, a residential workshop will take place probably in South Africa, and a major part will be dedicated to field experience and interaction with communities to jump on the field and better understand firsthand what are the main issues and the approach to create an effective and well-shaped communication for your audience. So I hope my English was good to explain all of these things, and I hope that it will be helpful for you. I kindly invite all of you to visit our website Coexistence.life, explore it, and think about if you have some material that you would like to share. Of course, you are completely promoted as an organization or as a project on the website. So if you give us your materials, we will write the project they are come from, and we will try to promote them. So trying to do a participate work, trying to find the better solution for doing communication, for promoting acceptance in human-wildlife coexistence. So, thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Well, this is, we have a fantastic opportunity to ask Anna questions or share comments, experiences. There's a lot to digest here, so thank you for sharing so much and cramming so much into a really short time frame. It's fantastic.
Thank you for the great opportunity to share with you all.
This is great. So anyone can post questions. You can either unmute yourself and ask a question. You're welcome to post your questions or comments into the chat bar. And then I'll also be fielding some questions and comments coming from other platforms as well. So let's see. Well, I might ask one, and I think so much of what you alluded to with communication comes from our inability to listen to each other. And so, we have a decent amount of students that participate in Conservation Colloquy. If you were to give them kind of one piece of advice on how to go out there and effectively do conservation, what would you suggest?
So I read a very funny story, an epithet that says that we have 2 ears but 1 mouth, so we have to listen twice that then we speak. So this is a great advice, I think. For sure, as I told you, to really the first priority of communication to change behavior and perception is to know perfect your public and to shape perfect communication on your public. To do this, you cannot base on your experience or on your suppositions about the public. You have really to jump in it and listen and observe everything and to forget yourself. And just, for example, I don't like the colors that Tanzanian people use for posters, because in Italy we have a different aesthetic taste. So if I have to develop a poster, probably I would use the colors that we use in Italy, but are completely wrong for a different culture and vice versa. So you have to stay here and listen and spending time in listening. If you don't do it, if you try to jump this phase, you will failure for sure.
Okay, we just got another question. In your opinion, how can communication play a role in creating more participative approaches?
So how communication can create a more participative approaches?
Yes.
This is the role of communication, indeed. And yeah, as I told you, at certain point, you have to involve communities, each kind of community you are working with, in all the processes of the communication. So shaping the strategy and shaping each taste with the community, each step of your communication. This involvement make feel them more responsible, more involved, more in charge of dealing that topic. So you don't have to develop alone the communication strategy, but it's a work that you do in collaboration with the communities to better understand which are the priority for them, which are the needing, which are the expectations, and which kind of communication they really need to have to have a change in behavior.
Okay, this is a really great question. So in your opinion and experience, what is the best participatory approach to be inclusive and democratic and allow participants to best share traditional and non-traditional ways of doing biodiversity and nature conservation?
I think there is not one magic solution that is good for all the situation, of course. So you have a lot of different, it's different if you are asking, for example, about the process to deal to develop communication. In this case, you have a lot of different tools that you can use, for example, focus groups and targeted focus groups. So you have before to understand the structure of the society and the dynamics, and then you develop a work of shared meetings as focus group, for example, that, for example, with the Maasai, you will do under the trees to be fair with the culture and to be really in line with them. But if you are speaking about the result, so having a strategy of communication that develop a system, a shared system to as for example, citizen science to acquire informations, there are a lot of different solutions that you can adopt. I found that citizen science is pretty easy and pretty smart to involve people because it's so simple, because it's like a play, because it's using a tool that is very modern and that now everybody uses, from the child to the elders. So citizen science developed in different way could be really a good system for acquiring new knowledge and also to deal with the human-wildlife interaction.
Another question about possibly, are there any plans to put Coexistence.life, put all that information into a book?
Sorry, I didn't.
Are there any plans to kind of synthesize all of this information into a book?
Who knows? There is a guideline that we developed with PAMS Foundation in the context of Coexistence.life that will be published in a couple of days, I think, maybe next week, that is collecting all this kind of information, but specifically developed on the PAMS experience here in Tanzania, in South Tanzania, working with communities for promoting human-wildlife coexistence. So that tool is the first interesting tool to consult, to refine this all of these informations, and it will be downloadable on the website of Coexistence.life.
Anna, I was hoping that you could maybe talk briefly. I know so many of us as conservationists know that communication is key and vital to, long-term persistence of these species that we're devoting our lives to. However, so many conservationists have never been trained in communication, and therefore, when they go forward and present communication strategies, we've seen that a huge percentage of these can actually backfire and have had, catastrophic consequences for the species that they're trying to study. Do you know of any kind of examples or strategies that conservationists could take to prevent this from happening in the future?
It's a good question, but yeah, this is exactly the reason because we developed Coexistence.life, because a lot of time, for example, in the team that is working on human-wildlife interaction, you don't have people that work on communication. You have biologists and researchers mainly, and they try to do communication. And it's a big disaster because it is not their job. They are great in doing research and conservation actions, but they have to delegate to somebody the communication. And this is the reason, because the languages and the time that you have to invest in communication is really huge. And the failure is linked to a lack of time invested in communication. So who is dealing with research cannot spend a lot of time in communication. It's obvious. It's not their job. They have to invest their time in other things. So there is not a secret to have a great communication, but the secret is to have somebody that do communication for this kind of projects, because the failure is, is linked to a lack of time and resources. And all the time, at the end of the project, everybody recognized the power of communication and the importance of communication. But at the end of the project, too late. And they did an ineffectual communication. So this is the reason, because I'm trying to offer a platform in which you can find examples, tips, bibliography, examples of media developed for communication, all in one place. And you can also write to have some tips. So you shorten the time. So even if you are not so skilled and you have not resources to have a person skilled in communication, you can go there and easily find materials for having a good examples, because it's very difficult to surf in internet and finding materials about communication for human-wildlife conflict is pretty difficult. You can find everything about techniques and measures of mitigation, but finding something specific about communication is very, very difficult. So it's again time to invest in the research. So I'm trying to optimize things.
Yeah, great point. And this was a lot of the basis of why we decided to create this communication workshop. And
exactly,
unfortunately, had to be canceled. But those of you that are interested, please feel free to contact either Anna or myself, because we will be moving forward with this workshop next year. Okay, another great comment. Let's see, from Neil. He was asking about. Neil asked, so people show so much more empathy for stories about individuals than groups generally. Are there outlets for stories of wildlife as individuals to help promote empathy for wildlife more broadly? And tales about a family of elephants, for example.
I lost you. Can you try to repeat?
Yes. So are there any outlets for stories of wildlife as individuals to help promote empathy?
So use individual stories to promote wildlife. Yes, of course. Of course, it's a good idea. As Wild Aid do a lot of time, they use celebrities, for example, to promote for their campaigns. But also, of course, stories about. Yes, again, you have to provoke emotions. You have to involve people, and a story about individuals or families' problems or things very specific are pretty useful to involve the public in the issue of human-wildlife conflict. Yes, definitely. is a good strategy. Also, for example, in the Facebook of PAMS Foundation, we are trying to do exactly this. So promoting stories coming from the field that the PAMS team collect during the work on the field. And so this is a very powerful tool to involve public and participate in the life of PAMS Foundation.
And then another comment, so there's a lot of alignment with the work that is being done with the Human-Wildlife Interactions Working Group, the IUCN, and the Conservation Translocation Specialist Group. And so those links will be shared with the group as well. So feel free to check out those additional resources as well and see where there's a lot of overlap and possibilities for more collaboration.
I have some problem in the network, so I don't hear you very well. I lost the last part of the question.
No problem. So we'll just be sharing some links with
Okay.
several of the IUCN working groups that I think have potential to be interesting for the group.
Sure.
I think we probably have time for just one last question. If there's anyone, I kind of skipped through a few. Okay. Do you have I know you are very fortunate, and Anna alluded to this, but she literally has traveled all over the globe and you know, learning and gleaning this wealth of information from so many individuals and projects, which is I think what all of us dream to be able to do someday. So it's you're living the dream. Can you just share one experience that kind of brought all of this back to you and helped you realize that you're on the right path and trajectory with this project?
As I told you at the beginning, the most powerful part of the trip for me, I'm not religion, I admit, but the part in which I went in contact with the Buddhist culture really made me very, very surprised about and told me something very important about communication and how to strategize so permanent communication in the society. But also, of course, other parts of the world. I went to India, Nepal, Tibet, and China, there in Asia. And when I went in India, I was totally astonished about the huge density of people that they have. And I wondered how they can combine natural places with human activities, because they really stay overlapped completely. And in any case, they never stop the link with the nature. So in any case, they are still more willing to accept animals as tigers, for example, than in Italy, the bears, to say just something. But I have an anecdote where I went there, and really tiger was, I never seen it, but she was walking along the villages every night. And also all the people told me, sometimes once I went attacked when I was driving with my motorcycle along the forest. Once I went attacked when I was walking during the night, and nothing happens in these cases. But once I went into the forest with a motorbike with a guy going to speak with a guy of the National Reserve. And along the way, I was completely scared and looking at my back all the time to just check the tiger was not running after me, trying to keep me. So I really had the sensation to be in the situation where the nature join the human activities. So generally, I'm a little bit scared by animals, but in any case, I just manage my fear, as has to be done in my opinion. But at that time, being scared by the idea of the tiger jumping on you when you are in motorbike was something completely new and strange for me.
That's a great, a great story. Well, wonderful. And I know that there's a few more questions, but I think we're running out of time. There's just someone who has posted. There's several questions that have talked about citizen science and the potential to increase negative interactions between people and wildlife. Could you just briefly talk about your thoughts on that potential?
I think citizen science is not pushing people, at least if we are speaking about a specific project, as we saw before, they are working with an organization on the tiger. So this is a very specific situation. But through citizen science, you are not pushing people to go in nature and to find science of the presence of animals and so on. It's just something that you can use by chance when you go out, when you go in the field, when you go in nature for having a walk, or just try to take a picture and send it in a box as iNaturalist, for example. Is just a way to enrich the normal way you use to go in nature. It's not something that try to push you to do it more. It's just a way to try to push you to do what you already do in the daily life, but in a different and maybe better way.
Great. And then I think one more, there's just a whole bunch of questions coming in now. If you've got one more second. The most challenging situation, place, or species that you have worked with. And what was the most important tool in resolving conflict in that situation?
I think that the most difficult situation I went in was in Italy, speaking about the brown bear on the Alps. So meeting a specific public categories that are living in the Alps, in the contact, in the places where also the brown bear lives, is pretty difficult. In changing the opinion, the values and perceptions of that kind of public is really, really difficult and requiring really a lot of time and effort to be at least approached. So sometimes I think you have just to not to try to fight again your more difficult public, but trying to understand which other you can more easily try to take on the landscape you want they go. So it's better to have a great wall on your back of people that are more or less on the same page, just on the border between yes and not, than trying to fight hardly with a public that probably you will never change opinion. So that kind, the rural communities of such very small valleys in the Alps where the brown bear lives, they are very, very difficult to approach. I think it was the most difficult situation I went in, and I decided to try to speak with other kind of publics without losing a lot of time and energy in that kind of public.
If you could please join me in thanking Anna so much for her valuable time and that incredible presentation and sharing her knowledge and experience. So please just join me in thanking her. Just a reminder that this webinar was recorded and will be posted on the Conservation Catalyst Conservation Colloquy webpage. So you are welcome to go and review it if there was anything you missed, and share that as a resource for colleagues and friends. If you would like to join our mailing list, please email conservationcolloquy@gmail.com. And I just want to take this time to remind those of us in the US to vote on the 3rd of November. Those of us outside of the US, please reach out to your friends and colleagues and ensure that they are voting, because the results will impact our conservation efforts around the world. And we need to have these conversations, important conversations. So please join us next month, Wednesday, November 4th, for Conservation Colloquy-Wildlife Wednesday. Again, the first Wednesday of every month, same time, same place. And we will be announcing our speaker in 2 weeks, so stay tuned. And thank you again. And this really was absolutely fantastic. And I look forward to all of the conversations and collaborations that will come from not only this talk, but this incredible resource that you've put together, and all of us learning together from each other, which is what we need to be prioritizing right now. So thank you again for all of your devotion and hard work.
Thank you, Aletris, for the opportunity to host me.
And thank you again. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you again in person as soon as
Sure. Looking forward.
Yes, sending a big hug. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. And we will hopefully see you next month. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.